Thanks for joining us again on another episode of Natural AF. I'm your host, Isaac.
And I'm Alexa.
And we are sharing with you some awesome secrets about breathwork in this episode. So if you're not familiar with breathwork or you're all too familiar with breathwork, either way, it's a very integral part of my journey and so many other people's that have had amazing transformations and unlocked things within themselves. And that's what we're all about here at Natural AF, is exploring what really is this experience, what really is possible, what our bodies are capable of, what it means to be natural AF, and the most empowered version of ourselves. And obviously breath is a big part of that, because without it, you'd be dead.
Yeah. Well, when we talk about on this show connecting to our natural state of being, I think, Adam talks about this. It is the first pillar, like connecting to the breath. That's why we called this episode Breath is Life. It was mentioned a few times throughout our interview. And that's the most simple way to put it. You can't live without breathing. We can go without food, we can go without water, but we cannot go without breathing. And connecting to the breath is, I think, such an integral part of connecting to who we truly are and definitely like reconnecting to our bodies, but also on a spiritual level, it can take you to other places. So yeah, really love this conversation. There's definitely lots of golden nuggets in this.
Yeah, there's depths to this that we explore that some of you may not have even imagined that was connected to breathing. So
yeah. And that. I think there's a bit of controversy in this episode as well for the people in the holotropic breathwork crowd that love that. I'm not super well versed on breathwork and stuff. Isaac was the one that kind of introduced me more to it. I mean, I did Kundalini yoga for about 1.5 years, and that's all, breathing practice with yoga poses and stuff. And I loved it. But I haven't explored, the holotropic stuff as much and whatever. And yeah, different strokes for different folks. That's what I reckon. So it's good to see both sides of different practices, because there are always benefits, but of course they can always be taken to an extreme or used as a crutch. So yeah, really interesting. Adam's got some really interesting stuff to present.
The wealth philosopher Robert Kiyosaki likes to say, there's 3 sides to a coin: heads, tails, and the edge. And intelligence is standing on the edge and looking and being able to see both sides.
Yeah, I love that.
And not to be a fence sitter or anything, there's not really even a side to this that you have to be on. But yeah, I think doing breath work, however you do it, with just honesty and truth, and also compassion and awareness about the limitations of yourself or others if you're a practitioner, is a good idea. So
yeah, and enjoy. Intention is key, and we talk about that. So before we get into it, a little bit of housekeeping. So first of all, as people know, this is coming out a couple of days later. We were without internet for almost a week.
We're behind schedule, so.
Well, we were without internet for almost a week. There was not much we could do. We finally had a technician out, so we're ready to go. Then when we got into the editing, when we finally had internet, we realized that for some reason, on Adam's end, we lost his video and audio in the last 10 minutes roughly. So it might end a little abruptly. We did the best we could in editing so that it wasn't a really harsh finish.
Leave them wanting to know more, not having heard too much. That's the natural AF way.
Honestly, we're not missing much. It was all the juicy stuff still in there. And so we just kind of missed the end and wrapping up. So stay tuned for the outro. We'll let you guys know where you can get in touch with Adam and his work. And he's got breath practices that you can purchase online and do the courses. And so lots of good stuff. So stay tuned at the end for that. All the links are in the show notes, of course, as usual.
Make sure you check your inbox. We just sent out the Natural Art Forum April newsletter, and we've got some nice discounts in there and updates for our markets for Australia. So we'll be out every weekend hitting the pavement with our bags in hand, showing the world these amazing products, and hopefully meeting some awesome folks. We always meet somebody interesting and just the right people show up whenever we go out and do markets. So hope to see you there.
So for our Aussie customers, we've got a clearance sale on at the moment with our Refresh floral scented deodorant. Just that one is on clearance at the moment. So it's $15 online. You can buy as many as you want. And for our listeners, you'll get an extra 10% off using the code NaturalAF10 at checkout. Head to the website, check it out. And if you haven't already, join our mailing list. There's a little pop-up when you go to the website. It pops up, ask for your email address, just pop it in. And then you'll get all of our latest updates via email.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely snag that floral scent deodorant while you can, because that scent might be going away. So the salt cream, it's a magnesium lotion that is very dense in magnesium, but not irritating to the skin, which was kind of a task, kind of a trick to pull off, especially when I made it into a lotion. So kind of proud of that one. It's good.
Yeah,
good
I'm proud of you too.
Works really well.
There's nothing else like it on the market. I've never come across, one, a magnesium-based deodorant, and two, a lotion deodorant. So I think it's awesome.
Yeah. There are a few others out there that use different types of magnesium. This uses the same magnesium I use in Alleviate, which is now the hexahydrate form, which is awesome. It's like a structured salt, crystalline, futuristic. It's the deodorant of the future, man.
Yeah. And the most important thing is that it actually works without putting a ton of chemicals on your body.
It's healthy. It's antioxidant rich, stimulates the lymphatic system, benefits your underarm health, and leaves you smelling like a clean hippie.
Anyway, so before we get into it, of course, if you love the show, please subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Share this episode. If you know someone that's a die-hard holotropic breathwork person, please send them this episode. Yeah. I'd love to hear what they have to say about it. And help us spread the word. So if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we would greatly appreciate a rating. So please rate us 5 stars. If you don't like us that much, just don't rate us anything. Don't be an asshole. And head to our link tree, follow us on socials, and you can interact with us more there. We love hearing from our listeners.
Yeah, I'm liking the Substack. I'd like to get more conversations going on there. I've been obsessed with a few different Substacks recently, and I like the way the comments are a thread. It's like almost like a message board blog, but it's a great way to share ideas and to interact with each other. So
it's actually a good point to make, because we did send out a update letting our listeners know that we were delayed in getting the episode out this week, and you will only get the latest updates through Substack. That's where we'll go first. Yeah. So just head to our link tree. It's in there. Go to Substack and subscribe, and you'll always get our emails first from there. And we always post the episodes first there, so you'll always be able to listen to them first through Substack.
All right. Any other housekeeping, or are we ready to launch into
Let's get into it. Adam Baulch is a dedicated breathwork coach, fitness professional, and holistic wellness practitioner with a passion for helping individuals unlock their full potential. As the founder of Progressive Breathing, Adam combines ancient wisdom with modern science to create transformative breathing and fitness programs that empower the body, mind, and spirit. Driven by a belief in the power of conscious breathing, Adam provides people with tools to reduce anxiety, amplify relaxation, and tap into their body's natural healing potential. For Adam, Progressive Breathing is a mission to inspire transformation and connection. Whether working with individuals, couples, or groups, he aims to create a space where people can thrive and reconnect with their authentic selves. Thanks so much for joining us today, Adam.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, welcome.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to have a chat and see where this goes. I like to go deep with thoughts and things, and I know you appreciate some depth, so
yeah, we're looking forward to this because you know, like we were just saying off camera, that you connect a lot of dots, and we love that. So before we get into the juicy stuff, let's just open it up, and for our audience, just share a little bit of your journey and kind of maybe some of the more significant life experiences that you've had that kind of led you to the work that you're doing now and where you are today.
Well, I guess like most of us, some change comes through challenge, through some pain, through some suffering, through some life choices that didn't necessarily reflect in the outcomes that I may have intended. And I guess we can fall back on that, life doesn't always give you what you want, but it gives you what you need. And I can sit here now and say that I probably never made too many mistakes. What I did do, though, was create a lot of learning opportunities for myself. Of course, those learning opportunities come with a bit of pain, a bit of suffering, and things of that nature. But injuries has been one thing that's, I guess, fueled my passion for what I do, and to be in the recovery space. So, I've had neck surgery, I've had a hip replacement. Started the journey in core strength 20 odd years ago from a back injury, not an uncommon injury that a lot of people suffer from now, L4, L5, down in that lumbar area. A lot of blocked emotions down there, and fears and different things. Had as a youth, had a reasonable upbringing. Like most people, there was a parent that I had a toxic relationship with, so was exposed to a bit of emotional trauma, humiliation. Had a lack of confidence. There was judgment. There was criticism. So, of course, early adult years, flipped that on myself. Highly judgmental and critical of myself. Perfectionist. Seeking, striving, pushing, not getting far, not understanding myself, escaping emotions. Always highly intuitive as a child. Allowed that to be conditioned out of me. Low self-esteem, low self-worth, low confidence, lack of trust in myself, lack of trust in reality, lack of trust in the people around me. It was consistent month after month, year after year, and you get to a certain age demographic and you got to ask yourself some questions. And what really originated from that reflection was, okay, there's a common denominator out of all this, and which is you, which is me. Someone's got to take responsibility for the outcomes of what happens in my life, and it's me, and it's only me, and it can only be me. And decided to get out of the victim consciousness and the blame game, and try and get away from that continual judging yourself, finding yourself guilty, punishing yourself, repeating that cycle over and over in different ways, self-sabotage. So I guess that's a snapshot of, and of course amongst all that, there was a lot of escapism through recreational substances, pharmaceutical substances that would alter your state of being, whether that be your mind, your body, your environment. Of course, all Band-Aid. Things that needed to be worked through. So I did that. I studied, I researched different areas of life, but I really went in. And that was the key, is the only way out is in. And I still stand by that today. And I think we're living through a era in time where we need to go in. We need to connect to spirit. We need to find ourselves.
Yeah.
And this is our saviour, is going in. Some external knowledge it's great, it's helpful, but until you execute on the knowledge learned, it's just borrowing and following. So I've really tried to create a path for myself and empower myself by making my own choices, not be influenced by others. Of course, in recent times, we've all experienced a change over the last 5 years. I was a fitness trainer, had a gym inside the hospital. They closed their doors on me, wouldn't allow me back in. I was lent on to move the business on, had to recreate.
Was that during COVID, you said? Or
yeah, so up here in Queensland, they put a mandate out, and then they dropped the mandate for most of the state, except for people that worked in care. Now, I didn't work in care. I was a contractor in a healthcare setting. They wouldn't let me in the building.
Yeah.
I was training doctors, nurses, executives. They were coming to me for their self-care. COVID seemed to eventuate. Then I seemed to be a brainwashed anti-vaxxer, labelled that inside my business, inside the hospital, by the people that came to me for their self-care and their health.
Wow.
So anyway, that created a career shift. I had to sit back and look at, what can I do to have a positive, constructive impact on humanity? Because I'm all about service and giving back to people, and providing tools, applications, and solutions for people so that they can live a better quality life. Now, what everything's an offer, and I just provide, and what people do with those applications, tools, and solutions is totally up to them. But I've now stepped into, and I've been doing, breath practice for a long time, but I stepped back into breathing, and come to realise that's the number one pillar to everything that we do.
What was your experience first with it? When did you first experience the breath work or breath practice?
So I sort of stepped into breathing 10 or 12 years ago. Not so much the rhythmic stuff, but I was using it, because I was designing guided affirmations actually. So I started designing guided affirmations with a breath pattern in there. And then, that sort of didn't fall away, but, so I was always deep into meditation, but, the breath patterning sort of stuff, I didn't take a great deal of notice, but I was invited out to a festival here locally, and I attended that and did some of their breath practices, which didn't really resonate with me, but I knew that there was something in it. I deeply knew that this was a pathway that I needed to take, because I knew that I could tap into complete relaxation. That's where all insights come from, is a state of complete relaxation. And like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to try some of these things, but I'm just going to alter the technique. And I guess that's where it started. So like a lot of people, I started doing a bit of huffing and puffing and Wim Hof stuff and breathing through the mouth, and start to get a bit of tetany and start to lose feeling in my hands and fingers and toes. And I'm thinking to myself, well, here I am doing what's meant to be healthy, some breath work, and I've got no circulation. How can that be normal? So that, I guess, sparked some curiosity to change some things, and I started doing the Wim Hof stuff, just breathing through the nose. And I was getting the same sensations, if not better. And then I started getting the same sense when people do the fast breath work for an hour, or however many breaths they do, and then they stop, and then they get the nice fluffy feeling in the pineal pituitary body. Well, I was starting to get that through every breath, not just have to wait to hold my breath for the body to go into equalization or back into balanced homeostasis to get that feeling. I was getting that feeling in every breath, and I could feel the connection from deep down in the pelvic floor and perineum area all the way to the brain. It was quite profound. So I continued that thread of curiosity and exploration, and I just explore with the body, explore as much as I can and connect and go deep. So I guess it started there, and started having some profound experiences, I guess, and the adaptation in the brain and the sensations that I now feel have just got deeper and deeper. Like I unlock specific parts and move on to the next unlock, and in microcosmic breathing and things like that, there is a number of circuits that you need to do before you unlock another section. So yeah, it all seems to align and synchronize in quite nicely with a lot of ancient Eastern breath practices and traditions that I've connected the dots to now. So yeah, so my practice, Fibonacci breathing, now is connected to, Ayurvedic, yogic, Qigong, microcosmic, Taoist, and deep diaphragmatic stuff. And you add in a little bit of Hermeticism with Ruach and Greek with Pneuma, things like that.
Yeah, that's what I actually love about sorry, Adam, just to jump in, but that's what I love about, like, even reading your bio, it actually reminded me a lot of, our little bio for natural art form, because Isaac kind of does the same thing, where he takes sort of this ancient wisdom, of using herbal remedies and combines it with modern science. And it sounds like you do the same thing too. And even just your journey, like, thank you for sharing, because I think so many people can relate to that, like the way that you grew up. Like, I think so many of us can relate to that and feeling really disconnected from who we are and maybe our families or our environment. And a lot of us have kind of, made that journey back to who we truly are, and we're in the process of doing that. So thank you for sharing that. And there's just so many similarities. And I think that kind of is the way forward now. It's taking this ancient knowledge, but bringing it into a modern day setting, because I don't think it's fully practical to go back to the way that the ancients lived, so to speak, in terms of in the physical setting. But I think a lot of the philosophy and all of that, we definitely need to bring into this modern day and combine it with the, especially modern science can be amazing to bring us more understanding. So I really love that you combine those two.
Yeah, thank you. And I look back at the ancient traditions and wisdoms and I honestly feel that there was room for evolution in their practices as well. Like that, they weren't complete. In fact, a good teacher or a good mentor will leave enough room for their student to surpass their knowledge and their wisdoms and their practices, because everything evolves. There's a part of microcosmic breathing that may have remissed some embryonic stuff and the connection of the tongue. There might be some stuff in Taoists that neglected the use of the diaphragm or the sacral pump. In even that little practice we did earlier with the alternate nasal breathing, now our body has an internal mechanism that closes those nostrils off automatically. It does it itself to balance things up. Do we need to physically do it to balance up the hemispheres of our brain, or innately does our body do that for us? I'm all for practicing things and stimulating and igniting things, but our body is designed perfectly. We don't necessarily need to manipulate it, to reach amplified states of awareness or altered brainwave states. There's stories of old Brahmins and yogas used to cut that ligament of their tongue so they could reach further up into their sinus duct to stimulate the Kachari mudra. Now, if you use a little bit of common sense, and I do this with my practice now, if you actually just create a little bit of suction with your mouth and your tongue and your gums, you can actually pull that Kachari mudra down that's in the back third of the palate, and you can stimulate it with the back third of your tongue. Every time you take a breath in and squeeze your perineum, your tongue wants to slide and glide anyway and stimulate that area. You don't have to manipulate your body, cut ligaments to push something up where it's not naturally needs to go. This is what alchemy is. Suction's required, pressure's required.
So that seems really extreme. What were they trying to get?
So they're trying to push.
What do you get from stimulating that
soft area of the palate to access part of the sinus duct that's connected to the optical thalamus of the brain, to stimulate it that way, from what I can gather. Someone said there's another meaning for why they were doing that. I'm not too sure, but that's the only thing that I can gather, because there is an energy point up there called the Kachari mudra, which is the third energy point in the roof of the mouth. And you can stimulate that just through creating some suction with some saliva. That saliva's got electromagnetic properties in it anyway. It's going to act like a magnet. Right, so it's going to transfer a current, electrical current or a magnetic current. And everything's connected. It's connected to the midbrain, to the pineal, pituitary area, through the vagus nerve.
Yeah, so you mentioned embryonic breathing, and this is something you specialize in. Can you just explain what that is and go a little more into that for people that don't know? I'm not even fully aware of what that is.
Well, embryonic breathing really just resembles or mimics, our breathing patterns when we're in the womb and we're connected by the umbilical cord. So it's really a reverse abdominal breath. So what you're doing is you're pulling in at the solar plexus. So you're drawing your belly in, and a little bit like, I explained earlier, is so the solar plexus sun is Bethlehem, or the bread of life, which is our stomach, right? If we could go into the sacred secretion stuff, and there's a psycho-spiritual seed that's born there every month from the full moon, but it's embryonic breathing. So what we're doing is we're acting like we're drawing nutrients from the umbilical cord in through the belly into the baby when you're in the womb. So all we're doing is imitating or mimicking that movement, so we can breathe through the belly and up into the lungs. This is what develops the baby, right? Is that breath that's turning water into wine as well. It's the story of that, because we're breathing in water is in the atmosphere. So that breath, is actually converting then into wine, which is blood. So that's the story of turning water into wine. Yeah. So it's just the breath. It's just the breath and blood. Yeah. Breath is life. It really is. So the embryonic breathing is really just a form of that. So the second stage of my Fibonacci breathing technique is embryonic breathing. So it starts off with a bit of microcosmic breathing, which is the squeeze at the perineum and urogenital area. And then to create that wave or Fibonacci spiral or vortex, however we want to look at it, because the heart's a vortex, as we've come to know as well. So the breath starts at the perineum, and then to create that wave, you then pull in at the solar plexus, so then it creates that wave, right? But we're trying to create that energy up through the cerebrospinal fluid as well to come up through the heart and through the throat. So this is where suction of the tongue comes in as well, because you can use suction of the tongue to help pull that breath through the throat and into the brain and into the third eye area. So you can actually breathe into the brain, but the breath comes through the cerebrospinal fluid. So it's actually, it's quite amazing. It's a little bit like you are drawing the energy from deep down in the base of your spine through a straw. Imagine your spinal column is a straw, right? And you're creating suction with the mouth, and that straw has got a bit of resistance. So you actually got to suck on that straw a little bit harder, which means just manipulation of the tongue and tongue pressure. And this is what alchemy is all about, is pressure, So creating some pressure, and then you can actually pull that breath all the way through. So the breath actually starts at the perineum all the way through to the brain. It's quite amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, that you were talking about off camera about the vagus nerve connecting from the perineum. And I don't remember from my anatomy training if that, like, where does it originate from? But I was keyed in on that recently. Another podcast I was listening to mentioned the perineum, or the vagus nerve connecting to the uterus in women, and I thought that was fascinating because there's something with the vagus nerve. I don't know if you have any more depth you want to get into with that, but what's the significance of that connecting the breath, the sexual organs essentially, and the reproductive organs and the brain?
Yeah, okay. So in Greek, another name for the vagus nerve is pneumogastric nerve. So in Greek, pneumo means breath. All right, so that vagus nerve can be controlled by the breath. So another name for it is the wandering nerve. So that vagus nerve originates deep in the brain, goes through the tongue, all the way down through the spinal column, through every major organ, and that's when I spoke about earlier, our organs being musical instruments that's strung together with a golden cord, which is the vagus nerve, all the way down through all major organs and energy centers, all the way down to the genitals in men and women. So that nerve, when connected, there's specific tongue positions, right, mouth positions. Of course, in Taoism, when you close the lips, there's meridian points on the lips. So that will close or connect an electrical circuit. We're electrical beings, right? We know that, right? So we've got an internal electrical circuit. We disconnect that electrical circuit every time we do what I'm doing now, which is talking at a rapid rate, opening our mouth. We're disconnecting that circuit. Right? So we've got an internal electrical circuit that needs to be running. For us to be healthy and to be vibrant, it needs to be connected. We shouldn't be mouth breathing. We just shouldn't be mouth breathing unless it's an emergency. Now, of course, there's certain times where we need to open our mouth, when we're talking, putting food in, belly laughing, pleasurable things with our partner perhaps. Don't want to go down that pathway too much, but if not, our mouth should be zipped shut. Our internal circuit should be connected. Our tongue switches the circuit on. So our lips close the circuit. Our tongue switches the circuit on when it's on the top palate, behind our front teeth. And our breath regulates the intensity of the circuit. Right, so all those three things are connected in together. So they're important. So that connection with the genital organs and the brain, well, we know I've been fortunate enough to experience orgasm, and there's something that also happens in the brain that also happens down in that genital area as well. There's not only a release of energy down in the genital area, but there's a release of energy in the brain as well. So our genital organs are definitely connected to our brain. There's no doubt about that. We seek that euphoria. So when you connect through the vagus nerve and correct tongue position, you can stimulate areas of your genital area to travel all the way up, and you can feel that effect in the brain. So when I've got correct, and I've always got correct tongue position when I do my breath practice, so when I squeeze the perineum, that little squeeze creates a wave, or another word for it is the sacral pump. We also have what's called a thalamic gate. So instead of ejaculating that life force creative energy out, we can cultivate that energy and we can draw it back in through the thalamic gate into the cerebrospinal fluid to travel and ascend back up the spine. So that travels back up the spine and amplifies the pulsation of the third eye. So you can feel it like a snake, like Kundalini. It moves up the spine in the waters. So that's connected. So as much as we can excite ourselves enough for ejaculation, we can arouse the ventricles in our brain just with nitric oxide, same as what we need for sexual function. We can arouse those ventricles in the brain, there's 4 of them, to dilate and expand. And when you dilate and expand those ventricles of the brain, this is where cerebrospinal fluid is produced. So that cerebrospinal fluid then starts to squeeze and push, and it's like, I don't know whether it's like a climax because I haven't experienced that, but it's like an ejaculation. You can feel pumping waters inside your brain. Now, when it gets up to the throat area, what happens is you've got the aqueduct of Sylvius, or the 4th ventricle. So much alike we ejaculate or climax, we can injaculate that energy back up through the aqueduct of Sylvius, or the 4th ventricle, back into the optical thalamus of the brain, which is the womb or the tomb of the brain, which is the esoteric occult story of Jesus and the resurrection.
So what's the end goal with that for people that are listening? What does this practice bring? And in the long term, in the short term, I understand it's very euphoric, but there's more depth to it than that, right?
I personally am searching, have been, understand now the seeking and searching is the barrier, but we all want mental clarity. We want amplified states of intuition. We want clarity of mind. We want a healthy body. We want all the good things. And breathing, nasal breathing in particular, just the health benefits that you can receive from doing a breath practice, a nasal breathing practice, is so profound. It refines and purifies the internal waters of the body, whether it's lymph, fascia, blood, cerebrospinal fluid. It reconnects you to your body. Your intuition, really does start to amplify. And the old story, once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's that sort of stuff. But the health benefits to cognitive function, to your endocrine system, to your hormones, everything just gets connected and linked up because we start to link our organs together. When our organs start to work in harmony together, magic starts to happen. They're all the energy centers, your liver, your kidneys, all these sorts of things. And they're talked about in ancient scriptures as those energy centers of the things we need to go through. So when we harmonise those things, our body just starts to operate naturally. Doesn't need as much food, doesn't need as much hydration. It utilises energy a lot more. Of course, sleep quality improves, performance improves, whether that's sport, career, relationships improved. Just your relationship with yourself gets deeper. There's not an area, and this is why I say it's the number one pillar to everything that we do. There's not an area that nasal breathing, slow, deep, but I emphasise this part, rhythmic. Rhythmic is the key. Our body loves rhythm. That's why it responds so well to dance. You know, you've played sport, Isaac. You know, you've done things. I'm sure you've danced.
Right.
You know, our body loves rhythm. It wants to be in flow. So when you breathe in a rhythm, our body responds to that. Our organs start to harmonise and vibrate and starts to eliminate all the waste products so much easier, absorb the nutrients and trace minerals and cell salts that we actually need. You know, so health out. I haven't had a cough or a sniffle or a sneeze for 4 years. Since I started nasal breathing every day, nothing. I live in this shit where there's crap in the sky every day. They've been going hard the last month. There's shit in our water. There's shit in our soil. It's everywhere. Couldn't be healthier. Could not be healthier. Haven't had a sniff, a sniffle, a cough. Haven't had anything. You know, just from slow, deep, rhythmic nasal breathing. It's simple. Something that we have to do every day. We can either breathe to survive and stay alive, or we can actually breathe to thrive and be vibrant. I choose thrive and vibrant. And all it is just, it's like anything in life. All we're doing is bringing some awareness around it. That's all we have to do. That's where everything starts, is bring some awareness around it. Now that I've brought some awareness around it, well, now what can I do differently? How can I change the way I feel by changing the way I breathe? I've got to breathe anyway. And I just take that extra 5 seconds, extra 10 seconds, instead of being unconscious and breathing through the mouth and, shallow, fast, unconsciously. People are just winding up their nervous system. Any mouth breathing is switching your nervous system on, saying, I'm in a state of fight or flight or freeze. You're breathing any more than 15 breaths a minute, you are accumulating so much stress into your nervous system that you're going to get sick. You're going to burn out. You're not going to sleep. You're going to be wound up. You're going to be agitated. You're going to be angry. You're going to be all these things because you're not breathing correctly. Because your body, your nervous system doesn't know the difference between a thinking experience and a doing experience. And now your nervous system is saying, I'm in a state of fight or flight or freeze. So I'm going to shut down. And this is what happens in some of this holotropic breathing. When they breathe so often through their mouth, people start to get tetany. What is tetany? Tetany is the body responding and pulling away blood from the extremities because it's saying, I'm in a state of emergency. I'm going to pull that blood away from the extremities, from the feet and the fingers back to the major organs so I can survive. So it's not a natural phenomenon to be getting tetany and to be getting these things in these faster-paced breath practices. They're actually leading a lot of their students or practitioners down the wrong pathway. So they haven't done the research. It's quite alarming, just for the sake of money and ego. We've all seen the spiritual trip and the spiritual ego that people are on and taken advantage of at the moment. We all live in a world where we want to trust people, and we put trust in people and we go and do these things and we wind our nervous system up even more. I've witnessed it. I've seen it. So we've got to be careful in who we place our trust in.
It makes so much sense. Yeah, with the mouth breathing, you sounded like you were explaining me like 10 years ago, like all the things you were listing off that happen when you mouth breathe. And I was very unconscious of my breath back then. And I actually did know that I was a mouth breather in my teen years because I got braces when I was about 12. I had them on for a year. And I still to this day don't know why, but when I had the braces on, my gums swelled up like almost all the way down to where the braces were. And my orthodontist couldn't figure it out. And he was like, oh, maybe you're allergic. And one of the things he said was maybe because you're a mouth breather, because at night I would quite often, and I knew because I'd wake up and I'd have like slobber on my pillow, my mouth would be open. And it's interesting because when I look back, I always had issues with my sinuses. And there were lots of things contributing to that, like in terms of my immune system and stuff. But it's just interesting looking back, like the more I was a mouth breather, the more issues I seem to have with my sinuses. And I find now that if I do feel a bit stuffy or a bit blocked, I actually draw more attention to breathing through my nose. And I actually learned from you, Adam, I think it was listening to your podcast episode on Anita's podcast, Inner Awakening. We've got more filters through our nose, which makes so much sense, but I just never actually knew that. So just even learning something small like that, like you said, just bringing the awareness to it. And so I am a lot more conscious now. If I am mouth breathing, I'm like, okay, why? And quite often the only time I do it now is when I feel a bit blocked up. So then I just draw more attention to, okay, well, let's bring some more air through that. And it actually does tend to a lot of the time help to clear it up.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm glad I, have had an impact, but you're exactly right. And this is what's happening when people are intentionally choosing to mouth breathe in a setting of holotropic breathing is you not only are you disconnecting the internal electrical circuit, which is vital. I can't emphasize this enough, is it's fucking vital to your health and longevity. The more you disconnect that service, that connection, the earlier you will die. That's as basic as I can say it. But just going back to the mouth breathing in itself, like our nose has a filtration system. So we know we're living in a world that's not necessarily clean air. There's particles out there, there's fragments, there's stuff. Mm. So if we're breathing in through our mouth, we're breathing those particles directly into our respiratory system and into our lungs. Now that's going to have a negative health impact, I would suggest. Not only does the nose protect, with the filtration system, through the nose actually, it also humidifies the air. So when you breathe in through the nose, so then that air enters your lungs and your body at body temperature. If you're breathing through the mouth and it's 45 degrees outside and it's full of wind and dust and shit, you're breathing 45 degrees worth of heat and the particles in the air straight in to your respiratory system and lungs. Now, what do you think that's not going to wind up your nervous system? That's going to put your body in a state of fight or flight or freeze? Of course it is. Of course it is. These are just the simple things. Just the mechanisms of why we have a nose to breathe through and a mouth to eat through. The body's perfectly designed. Yes, the mouth can be used as an auxiliary. We're in a state of an emergency, or even when we're exercising, breathing out through the mouth every now and then is okay because our body needs to expel that carbon dioxide buildup to get back to some homeostatic balance, and that's okay. That's what the mouth is there for. It's an auxiliary for breathing. So if we're in a state of stress, and I'm sure you've done heavy CrossFit sessions or, a big run or whatever, and sometimes we breathe through our mouth and that happens. But you can train your body not to do that. Like last year, I was able to run 10 Ks without breathing through my mouth. I could run 10 Ks for an hour and 20 minutes and breathe through my nose the whole time. You can train your body to do that. And breathing through the nose also creates a little bit of resistance as well in the respiratory system. So you can actually keep the air in there longer. So the nutrients that's in the air, you can absorb into the organs. If we just breathe in fast, shallow into the chest, nothing's actually reaching where it needs to go. There's no nutrition in that whatsoever. Yeah, we need to breathe in that electricity to stimulate certain things on a molecular level to release the things out of the cells that we need to get rid of and to absorb what we need to keep us vibrant. Yeah, we're not just breathing in air, we're breathing in electricity, as well. What are we actually breathing in? Well, that's a question in itself. What is in the atmosphere? What are we breathing in? Does our body live in spirit, or does our spirit live in the body? Are we breathing in spirit in every breath? I say, yes, we are. Are we breathing in electricity? I say, yes, we are. What's in the atmosphere out there? How do we get signals like this? There's electricity out there. There's magnetism in the air. There's plasma. There's water. There's ether. There's solar energy. There's lunar energy. There's scalar energy. What the fuck is in the air?
That's a good question.
Definitely a lot more to breathing in the air than is commonly understood. There's all this stuff with Veda Austin and water. There's obviously moisture in the air, a lot up here in the northern rivers. And there's definitely something to that. And then also in the forest, and I've never lived in a forest like look at what we have here. We're literally in the bush. We're surrounded by trees. We've got a massive fig tree over us and all these other trees. But you notice it a lot in the pine forest back where I'm from in Wyoming. It's almost like you're getting aromatherapy as you go through the forest, as you're breathing in the pine and the scent of pine, the pollen and all that stuff. It can be very medicinal in some gentle, subtle ways, but it's sometimes those subtle things that you're talking about that are in the air that make the biggest difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more to it than what meets the eye, so to speak. I think there's a lot more in the atmosphere that we breathe, and I think our body also alchemizes the air that we breathe in a different way that perhaps we haven't been educated on or we know about. You look into so many ancient practices and there's a common thread, and breath is life, and it is life. And without it, we die, right? It's the first thing we do when we enter this world, and it's the last thing we do when we leave. So it needs to sustain us, and not enough emphasis is put on it other than the big circle jerk festivals doing the holotropic bullshit of look at me, I need some attention, my spiritual ego needs a little bit of a uplift. And I think that's what
it's definitely gotten very popular. Yeah, the holotropic stuff has definitely become synonymous with quote unquote breath work. And that was my first experience with it, but it was through a different method. It was definitely inspired by the holotropic stuff, but it was only through the nose, in and out through the nose. And that can be very activating and can have some good results. Like we had a very beautiful session with it with a friend of mine, Eric Casano. But it was definitely, there's some people that could not hang with it. Like it was too activating. It was putting them in a state where their nostrils were starting to close off. Like fast rhythmic breathing on the nostrils can sometimes irritate them a bit. But for some people, it was definitely clear. It was like a very beautiful experience. And I thought it was interesting, the idea that the more you breathe, and you can do it slowly, but as you breathe, like you're talking about with electricity, I see that as connected to the tetany in the hands as well, as like as you're building up electricity in the body. I've had some very interesting experiences with that since then, where I've had the tetany, but I've been doing breath work in that form around the elements and near fire. And as the tetany builds up in my hand, just passing my hand, just briefly touching the flame. And I don't recommend people do that because you might, burn yourself. But as soon as I did that, the energy released. I was like, I'm up for like extreme shit, but I'm also like, wise and like, okay, I'll be cautious if I need to be cautious. But I just like playing with that. And the idea that you have this energy build up and I pass it near a flame and it releases. There's some interesting, mysterious stuff going on with that.
Yeah. Look, I'm not against holotropic breathing. What I'm against is mouth breathing. Now, you can do the fast-paced breathing 100%, and I do it every day myself, and I've got practices that offer the faster-paced stuff, but you do it with a closed mouth. You do it with your tongue in the right position. You engage the right muscles in the right area to stimulate the sacral pump so you can create that energy flow. And I feel when you're doing that as well, it's a little bit like revving a car engine, right? Or charging the batteries. So we want that circuit. We want to charge our body up every now and then. We want to charge our batteries up. We want to fill it up. That's okay. Right? But to do it through the mouth and disconnect the electrical circuit, right, and for the health reasons of breathing and all that garbage as well, and putting the body in fight or flight, no. Okay, your body knows that you're in a state of rest and digest when your tongue is in the right position, when your mouth is closed, and you've got that internal electrical circuit. So there's no risk of doing the faster-paced breathing when you're actually set up correctly. The risk is when you start doing it through the mouth and you disconnect the electrical circuit This is where the risk involves, and this is where most of the tetany happens. And sometimes it's just a matter of posture as well as whether we're opened up, when we do some breath work as well. So that posture can also be really important as well. And I prefer to mimic a sleep-like state for breathing, to open the airways up, to make sure that the spine is aligned and the head is aligned as well, to allow for fluid flow. We don't see too many waterfalls flowing up the waterfall. They're always flowing to the source. Most rivers that I know flow and the ocean is at level. So our internal waters need to be level for that sacral pump to start pumping those waters through. We need to be level. If we're sitting up in the lotus position and we've got a bend in our here and here, and we've got a bend here, and all of a sudden our chin is depressed down here, we're closing off our airways there, our shoulders start to roll forward, we're closing off the airways of our chest. Okay, and then you've got the compression of the spine as well. So your spine is not necessarily aligned. And when does most of the magic happen? When we do our recovery, when we astral travel, when we dream, when we lucid moments in our life. It's when we step out of the fucking way in sleep. So if we can imitate sleep-like states, and this is where we go into different brainwave states as well, is we can imitate that state consciously. We can be still, we can be empty, we can be silent, and we can induce and create all the things that happen in sleep. We can do it in an hour of intentional rhythmic breath practice.
Yeah.
Just going back to, and I think you know this, that I don't call it breath work. It shouldn't be work. If it's work, it's effort. If it's work, it's stress on the nervous system. It's a breath practice. Right? To master anything, you need to practice. It's like a martial arts practice, a yoga practice, a meditation practice. I won't say a general practitioner practice, but it's practice. The more you practice,
they're practicing something. Witchcraft, maybe.
The only way to master anything, right, is to practice. It's not work.
Yeah.
If it's work, it's stress.
Yeah, well, you brought up an interesting point earlier about the altered brainwave states, and I've definitely noticed that. To me, that was the biggest thing that I took away from doing the breath practice and all that with my friend Eric. The ideas and like the unlocking and inspiration and things like doing this podcast came to me. It was a feeling of knowing, and I must do this out of the feeling afterwards. So now when I do the breathing work like that, I keep a notebook next to me, and I just get this flood of inspiration, ideas, any kind of problems that I've been mulling over for a while. It seems like I'll just have like a dozen or so possible solutions for it. So the brain just gets into a much more receptive, creative state.
Well, it's interesting, Adam, just to piggyback off that, it's very interesting what you said about how the vagus nerve is connected. I mean, because, I learned that in nutrition, just learning anatomy, but I've learned so much more since then in terms of more of the energy, I guess, of the vagus nerve and how it does innovate pretty much every system of the body, but especially that sacral area, because that is our life force energy. It is the energy of creation. And so the fact that it does connect and then if you look at it in terms of the chakras, it's going all the way from the bottom and then connecting it, bringing it back up. And like you said, the brain seems more receptive, but I would interpret that as the mind is more receptive to this creative energy instead of us trying to think our way into I need an idea, I've got to think of it. It's like this flow of creative energy from, what I imagine to be coming from the sacral center all the way up. And then the way that the breathing can facilitate that is really, really, really powerful.
Yeah, the way I look at it is, and I know there's different interpretations of this quote, but as above, so below. I mentioned before about the ability to ejaculate that life force creative energy back into the brain. Well, we can also ejaculate that back out, as well, can't we? So there is a connection there.
Right.
There's certainly a connection there. And we can cultivate that energy. Yeah, and this is what, some ancient traditions is about, is, is cultivating that sexual life force creative energy, retaining it, refining it, pulling it back into the system, back up, ascending back up the spine to the pineal pituitary, to the third eye area for expansion. Or whether we say that, you've got to do X amount of microcosmic orbits through the governor and conception channel until there's enough orbits being done, and then that energy will shoot up the thrusting channel up to the crown. So, or in Kundalini, you got the Ida and Pingala nadis. When they balance enough, then they start to shoot up through the Sushumna up to the. So you've got 3 nadis, or channels in both. People just talk about the 2. It's not about the 2.
Are the nadis physical, or is that an energetic channel?
I believe it's an energetic channel, and what we see with on a picture, of a anterior or frontal view, is we see this left to right movement. It's a 2D image. It's actually 3D, and it's a vortex, like a DNA spiral that moves up there. That's what's happening. So it's not this left to right stuff. If it's anything, it's posterior to anterior. This is the curve of the spine. It's posterior to anterior. That's the movements. And when you do the breath and you create the wave or the vortex, that's what you feel, as it goes posterior to anterior. Like everything, a lot of this shit has been inverted. It's been designed to confuse us. The postures, the movements, everything like that.
What you said just makes so much sense about like the vortexing, because even just as soon as you said that, it just reminded me of our toroidal field. As we know, we have a biofield, we have an energetic field that surrounds us, and 100%. We are the center of it. And that's, 100%. That's exactly what I envisioned. Yeah.
Our heart is a vortex, and we need to breathe through the heart. Why is there so much information of breathing into the belly? I'm not saying breathing into the belly is a bad thing. I'm not. I know it's in the rest and digest, and it's okay. Any nose breathing is king or queen in my world, as long as you're breathing through the nose. But if you're breathing directly into the belly, well, where's that energy going? It's staying and it's pooling in the belly. What's the most electrical magnetic force in our body? It's the heart. Our heart is 5 or 100 times more magnified than anywhere else. Why are we breathing that air and keeping it in the belly? We need to breathe it through and up and out, not just allow it to pool just down in that lower dantian area. That's just going to add to the stagnation of stored emotions and all this stuff that's down there. That's our emotional centre down there. We're just adding to the emotional centre, keeping what's down there there. That's all we're doing. We need to breathe through the belly and up, and then the out breath, whatever air doesn't fall out of the lungs, falls back into the belly for the next breath. So the belly still plays an important part in the breath, but you're not breathing into the belly, breathing through. That's a very important part.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to learn this stuff too, just for each individual, just knowing the different breath patterns, what they can be used for, because I think there's a time and a place for everything. So for certain outcomes, let's say, belly breathing might be what that person needs for that particular whatever it is that they're trying to work through or whatever. Yeah, like I think that's what resonated so much when I first heard you speak about breath work in the way that you do, or breath practice. Because I don't have a huge background in breath practice really. Like I've had some like more experiences now, but like definitely when I met Isaac, he was like right into it and loving it. And you were kind of new to it too, but really dived in. He really, really, really resonated with him. Whereas for me, it's really funny. I never really liked the holotropic tetany. When he was telling me what would happen with these tetany, it used to actually freak me out. Like when I would think about it, my nervous system, I could feel, I was like, that's not for me. No. And so it was really interesting for me listening to you speak about this for the first time. It resonated very deeply for me. And again, for me, I am a person who has always tended towards a very heightened nervous system. I suffered with anxiety for most of my life, and it's like I'm much better now and I have a much more regulated nervous system, but it makes total sense why I never gravitated towards that, because for me, that would probably be way too activating, and I resonate more with things that are more relaxing and that are more relaxing to my system. So again, there's a time and a place for everything, and I think different people need different things.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Yeah, the technique thing's an interesting. It's certainly not normal. I mean, it's normal if you're in stress and your body's in shock, or you're in hypothermia, and this is, and when your body's in shock, or hypoxia or all the rest of it, our brain does crazy things. We start to imagine. We start to hallucinate. Are we actually having a psychedelic experience? Or are we hallucinating and imagining things because our body's in shock? And then we're just going to tell our friend that I had a holotropic experience and had a psychedelic experience and got me pat on the back and got the attention that I needed. And okay, what's now changed in your life? You've had this psychedelic holotropic experience. What's changed? What's shifted? You've told me you've had this experience. What's different in your life? How's your health? How's your relationships? How's this? How's that? What's changed? And then I haven't found too many people where much has changed. I just haven't. Haven't seen the change in their body. I haven't seen them shed the weight that they no longer need. I haven't seen them more emotionally stable. I haven't seen them with more mental clarity. All I've seen them and heard them do is talk about having a psychedelic experience. Well, you know what? I've done it. I've had it. I've also had plant medicines and psychedelic experiences, and you know what? It's not that. It's not that. That's imagination and hallucination. That's the body in shock. That's not a psychedelic experience. I haven't had too many psychedelic experiences, in fact, that are fun. They're all a bit challenging. So, I don't know. But I understand the benefit of community, of doing something together, of being in a place together and having that support. So there's that element of that, which is fantastic. And it is bringing more awareness around breathing. Some people have an experience and realise that, just like you did, Alexa, that this is maybe not for me. I've known people to go there in an anxious state and then have a breakdown.
Wow, yeah, I could imagine.
Do fast breathing and have an emotional breakdown and have to be assisted from the environment. So there's danger involved.
Yeah, that could be a very negative experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's like anything. Like Alex Zek was talking about this on a recent podcast, which we chatted about, Adam, during the week. And he made a very good point, and I'm 100% agree with this. It's like anything. There can be, what's that saying? Like that you can even have too much of a good thing. Like there's such thing as too much of a good thing. So with anything, whether it's breath work, whether it's psychedelics, whether it's, like plant medicine, whether it's cold plunges and all these things, if you're doing it to an extreme or you're doing it because you get something out of it, like it's this, like, almost like this looshing energy that you get something from it. And it's not, like you said, you're not seeing any really material changes in your life. You're not feeling shifts within yourself. It's like, that's out of balance. And it's like anything. There can be really good things like that are great for you. But if you're not doing them with the right intention and the right reasons, I think that's when it can always be maybe not harmful, but it's definitely not beneficial.
Yeah, I think it's become a crutch and a way for people to escape their life in different ways.
Yeah.
They've just shifted the context.
Yeah. We're really good at using something medicinal as a distraction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're trying to use something medicinal as something that's recreational, and it's not. It's there for medicine and to teach you something. If you're just trying to escape and get a bit lightheaded and what have you, you're probably not going to get the outcome that you intended. Well, depending on what you, and this is the power of things as well, is the power of intention. Like that is powerful. Intention, and I talk about imagination before, but intention and imagination and visualization directed in the right areas can be very powerful. And I explain that, in Fibonacci breathing is if you visualize, a golden ball of energy, when you squeeze that perineum and you take it all the way up your spine and around and back down. Like you're actually adding to the outcome of what you're going to get from the breath and what you see. Because visualization and intention and imagination is so powerful. It's energy, it's electricity. So they can be really good things.
Yeah. And Adam, can you go more into, so I really do want to get into this, into your Fibonacci breathing. So for anyone, if you're listening on the video, Adam's got a t-shirt on and it's got the Fibonacci on it, and it's Chi, Qi Chi. So Fibonacci breathing, which I love. So that Chi energy. But obviously that plays into, like it ties in with the Fibonacci sequence. So can you kind of, explain to us first how you came up with that concept, and then how you kind of took the Fibonacci sequence and incorporated it into the breath practice?
Yeah, I can and I will, and it's probably a little bit weird in a way, because Fibonacci breathing was my original concept, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and it's a little bit of remiss. I wasn't sure that how many people were actually abreast of the spiritual element. So I turned it into a health practice, basically a breath practice that was revolved around health. But the Fibonacci is, the QI is chi energy. So that's where it relates to the microcosmic orbit, which has its origins or roots in ancient Qigong. And this is, cultivating this microcosmic orbit. And there is an orbit that it does follow, but I don't believe it's actually an orbit. I think it's a figure 8 movement, which ties in more with the DNA, the wave, the vortex, the spiral, things like that. So every breath is based on the Fibonacci sequence. So it might be a breath in for 2 and exhale for 3. Inhale for 3, exhale for 5. Inhale for 5, exhale for 8. In for 8, out for 13. And I've extended my practice all the way out now to in for 21, out for 34, which is a 55-second breath, which I can do for an hour. So basically 1 breath a minute. So that's the origins of it. And Fibonacci breathing was originally only going to be a subsection of some progressive foundational strength and stability programs that I've designed, which they're just still designed now. So I've just drifted away from that, and I've purely focused on breath. So I've now stepping sideways, and progressive breathing's still there, but I'll use progressive breathing more as a health, performance and recovery practice, and that'll be more for your health, for your physical conditioning, for your mind and for your emotions. But Fibonacci breathing is more directed to the connecting to spirit side of things. Yeah.
Beautiful.
I'm not too sure whether that answers your question, but we've got this chi,
I guess
pranic energy that flows through our body. So the chi energy comes from that. That's the chi, the qigong side of things.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned off camera earlier something about the golden, what's it called, the golden ratio?
Yeah, that's Fibonacci.
Yeah. So, but you were mentioning it in terms of the body. Can you explain that a bit more?
So let's just look at our finger, for example. So that short little part of the finger, that is 0.61 of those 2 knuckles together. When we add that extra part in, there's 0.61 or the golden ratio. So the golden ratio is between every joint. So it's 0.61 or 1.61. So it's the same with Fibonacci. You divide 3 by 5 or 5 by 8 or whatever, you end up with that golden ratio. It's the same thing. So you look at the patterns of flowers and especially cactuses, and the easiest way to see it is you see the Fibonacci spiral. You see it in shells. So that golden ratio is everywhere that we go. It's part of the natural harmonics of life. It's, even that shape itself, that geometric shape, has power. We see it, in the solar system. We see it if we were to ball, or a sponge and throw it and video it and slow it down, it actually makes, that spiral shape. So it's that Fibonacci sequence, yeah. So that's where it's rolled
so
in
fascinating.
with that, yeah. And I also feel for that extra relaxation that the out breath needs to be longer than the in breath. It needs to be there's no effort in the out breath. This is our connection to the void and nothingness, and there's nothing to do, nowhere to go. It's just a void. Yeah. So each breath has a inhale, but then there's a pause. There's the letting go, complete relaxation, and there's a pause. So there's only really one section of a breath. They're actually doing something, and that's the inhale. Everything else is surrounded by nothingness. And where does the magic happen? Where do we get insights from, revelations from? Nothingness. When we are completely relaxed. And again, going back to why you're not going to get anything spiritual out of holotropic or fast-paced breathing, that's not where insights come from. It doesn't come from work. It doesn't come from busting a gut. It comes when you are completely relaxed and you let go. So there's elements of the breath that you need to let go as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that when I was doing the breath work. It was at first, to me, I have different motivations for doing that. It was like, it's interesting. I have a background in training in Army Special Operations and taking the mind and the body to heights that I've never even heard people discuss as possible. When you reach a point of exhaustion, when you reach a point of breaking, and are you the kind of person that can step forward even at that point? And it was interesting for me. It is, granted, the kind of breath work I'm talking about can be kind of extreme. And when you try to go for 2 or 3 hours breathing at a fast pace like that, you go through different gateways. And the tetany I experience, it resolves itself at some point. And then you reach different heights of elation, relaxation, and you get to a point to where your body's breathing on its own. And it's almost like you're not even, you're not trying to maintain it. You're not struggling. But it can take about 45 minutes, an hour to sort of just realize your body's like, I'm okay. And it can be, and this is all with the mouth closed, and that is very important. But I just noticed there's electrical things that happen, but it's also just the discipline it takes to monitor the depth, breathing up from the belly, chest, and up into your shoulders, like breathing it all the way up and then keeping it going with no pause. And then just the discipline of doing something that takes focus and is slightly uncomfortable or maybe intensely uncomfortable at periods, and just having the discipline to do that. Now, granted, this is not for everybody. This is like, this is something that appeals to me, where I'm like, yeah, I can be very, very, very uncomfortable and know that I'm having a good time. Like, I'm doing this because I like seeing where my body will go. But it wasn't until after you stop breathing, or after you stop the fast breathing and then you relax, and then you're sitting in this pool of energy, or you're laying, because it was typically done laying down, and you're laying in that pool of energy. And then that was when all these things flooded in. It was just like, after all of the work, after all of because you're literally sweating, like your body becomes energized, you start sweating. To me, it feels like basically as if I'm doing a marathon distance run without running. It's the same kind of breath movement. And so I'm sweating as if I'm running, all of that. And my muscles are trying to like activate, and it's just fascinating. Like, I'm just curious about all this stuff, but I also have a lot of trust in my ability to tell when I'm in a danger zone, or when I'm just struggling or whatever.
And also, because I would just say too, Isaac does have a very strong, but there's another word that's not coming to me, but he has a very strong constitution where he can deal very well with very extreme things. And like he said, like, that's not going to be everyone. And for me as a woman, like, that is not me whatsoever. And I would dare to say that most women would not be like that, especially if they're very connected to their feminine energy. Like, we're not meant to be like that. We're not meant to go to extremes, especially in the physical realm. So that's why I was saying earlier, like, there are different practices that are going to resonate with different people. And that, you know, like the example that Isaac just shared, that he can handle that level of breath work. Like, I just could, like, he's told me those experiences and I'm like, that is not for me. Like, I'm never going to do that.
Yeah. But equally so, doing your Fibonacci, what you've talked about, I haven't done that for like an hour or more, but there is something just focusing and just breathing and having the discipline to sit there and do that for an extended period of time is completely transformational and on so many different levels. But you're right. It's when you're laying there in peace and stillness, that's when the really good stuff happens. It's not really in the fighting and the struggling. It's in the relaxation. You're 100% right on that.
Yeah.
Well, just a couple of things on what you mentioned, just going back to the first thing you mentioned, and you're right, is what happens is when you do enough cycles in the microcosmic orbit, is what happens is that microcosmic breath turns into a cosmic breath, and the breath flips and the breath breathes you, and that's what happens. As you start to get to a point when you breathe slowly, deeply, for long enough, is no longer you need to actually engage in the breath pattern. The breath breathes you. It's quite amazing. So, but the other thing is what's happening is when you're doing some of that faster style breathing and you stop, is the body then goes back into internal balance or homeostasis or equilibrium. When you reach that point of equilibrium, that is complete bliss, you know, because you've stressed the system out a little bit. Now you've allowed it to fall back into equilibrium, to allow it to find its own balance. There's stillness, there's emptiness, there's silence, you know, and this is where we've now got fertile terrain and environment for things to enter. So this is a perfect opportunity. But I still do, and like you, not doing, and just following on from that, I do have Fibonacci power breathing, which is a faster style breath with breath retentions, and recovery breaths in there. So I do offer that. It's all nasal breathing, of course, but it's based on the Fibonacci sequence again. But I also, to support breathing, I will do things and I will go and exhaust myself. I'll go and do a 50 or 60 kilometre ride and, you know, get my heart rate up to 180, 190. You know, to complement those things daily, I'll go down the beach, you know, I'll get some earthing, I'll get some grounding, I'll get some direct connection to the sun. You know, I'll get bare feet on bare earth, on the sand. You know, so I'll discharge and I'll recharge the system as well. Like, it's still about doing these. I think as a man, we need to go out and do exhaustive things. We need to physically expel our body of all the energy. We need to empty the cup so we can fill it back up. You know, so I think doing exhaustive things, I don't choose to do the exhausting things in a breath practice, but in other areas of life, I do. You know, I love it. I think we've got to have that balance. Like, as much as I love to get my heart rate down to 45 or 40 beats a minute, I need to go to the opposite polarity of that, and I need to get my heart rate of what it's potentially still capable of doing. Otherwise, I'm in the process of dying. You know, if you're not using your lungs to their full potential, they'll start to disintegrate. You know, if we're not using our nose to breathe through, the mucous membranes and things will start to break down, and then you won't be able to breathe through your nose. So it's the use it or lose it scenario with a lot of these things. You know, if we're not doing things correctly, you know, contracting our muscles to their full potential, well, that contractibility ability starts to diminish. It's with anything. You use it or lose it. You use it to its potential. Doesn't mean that you have to fill your lungs up 50 times a day. But what if you just do it once a day? How many people out there do you think, when was the last time they actually took a full fucking breath in through their nose and actually filled their lungs up and filled their stomach up with electricity, with spirit, with atmosphere, with air? How many people do you think do that on a daily basis? I would
Not
suggest,
a lot.
I would suggest it's less than 1% of the population that actually fill their lungs and use their lung capacity to their full potential. You know? So I provide exercises like that in my programs is so people can build the expansion and their VO2 max of their lungs, so they can improve the strength of their pelvic floor and perineum. You know, so they can improve the strengths of their solar plexus and their abdominal wall. So it all leads to smoother breathing. You know, humming exercises to regulate the nervous system.
Yeah. The pelvic floor thing is so important. Yeah. When you talk about the pelvic floor thing, the last time I did a breath session with you, I was confused. I didn't do the pelvic floor thing throughout the whole thing. And then I realized afterwards, I'm like, oh my God, that would have been next level. So I'm definitely going to jump on at some point and check out your program and go through the Fibonacci sequence with the muscle component to it from the pelvic floor. And for men and women, but for men that are, that want to improve your performance sexually and all that stuff, it's simple breathing and then pelvic floor exercises. And that'll unlock some seriously different levels of ability and connection and presence with yourself that will spill over to your partner. And then it just creates, some really, really good stuff.
100%. In fact, practicing this method together in unison, is an act of sexual alchemy as well. Practicing these movements together, engaging in that type of stuff can amplify two people together in their spiritual awakening process. There's no doubt about it. Now, those muscles we use in the process of orgasm are the muscles we need to train, because we need to use them in a reverse way. That, as I said earlier, that energy can be expelled out for procreation, or it can be cultivated and reused and reabsorbed into the body and used for spiritual amplification. So you can either ejaculate or you can injaculate. Choice is yours, but that creative life force energy is there, and it's powerful, and it should be cultivated. It shouldn't be wasted. It should be acknowledged. Some attention should be brought to it. And that, with the connection of the tongue and the brain, it's an amazing connection. It really is. It's quite profound once you get that connection, and all you have to do is squeeze your perineum a little bit and you feel that energy just wobble up your spine to your brain, and then your brain just starts to, pulsate and wave. It's amazing, just from a little flick of your perineum.
Yeah, that's very good. I definitely encourage people to go check out Adam's course or courses. Sounds like you've got a few different offerings there. And is there anything you want to say before we
I really love this conversation, because it's really got my mind ticking, because like you said, Adam, breath is life. You can't live life without breathing, right? It's as simple as that, but it can be harnessed and again, with the right intention and put towards so many different things. And I love anything that incorporates, like, there is this aspect, like, it's very physical, but there is this spiritual aspect of it, and even emotional, because it can help to move emotions and kind of move stuck energy as well. And so it does have this really holistic feel to it. But I was just thinking of all the different uses, like, as you were talking about kind of all the, in terms of like related to the sexual organs, I'm on the first day of my period, and I was just thinking, and I don't get really bad cramps really anymore, but it feels a bit uncomfortable the first day. And I was just thinking, I never actually thought to actually sit and do a breath practice, with that uncomfortable feeling, to just allow the energy to flow a bit more. And then I was thinking, you could have like breath practices, and maybe I'm giving you some business ideas here, Adam, but like, you could have breath practices for women and to use at different stages of the cycle, and then breath practices for men and at different points, in time for men, like whether it's like after you've just done this really extreme thing, or, if you actually need to relax or whatever. Then I was thinking about like, and there's lots of nervous system exercises I know with breathing that can help to regulate the system, but like nervous system practice. And then I started thinking about human design and like breathing practices for different designs and, with different energy centers. So I just love it. I honestly, I feel like I need to sit down and like brainstorm like all these different, areas that breathwork could expand into, to really target different things and really, like you said, like enhance the quality of life for people, because that's really what it comes down to. So I love your philosophy, Adam, and thank you so much for sharing everything with us.
Well, sorry for the abrupt ending here, folks, but like we explained in the intro, we got cut off. Once the internet came back, we realized we were missing part of the video and audio from Adam. But I feel like we covered everything, though, in the first part of the interview.
Yeah.
And if you want to know more, we've got some links where you can learn more about the breathing.
Yeah. So to connect with Adam and access some more of his work, we've got Progressive Breathing is one of his websites. So progressivebreathing.com. Everything will be in the show notes. This is where you can find his breath programs, courses, and ebooks. He's written 3 books, and really reasonably priced, guys. So if you're new to breathwork, this is like a really good way to just kind of dip your toe in without diving in and spending hundreds of dollars on a breathwork retreat. There's another website that Adam's just starting to move into, but he said to list it. So that's FibonacciBreathing.com, and that's Fibonacci QI.
Yeah, check the show notes. You'll see the spelling and the link.
You can connect with Adam on Instagram. And also he's just launched a course on the Living Free Movement platform. So again, we plug the Living Free Movement for free all the time. They're not sponsors. We don't get any kickbacks from it. We just love them. And he's just launched a course on there as well. So it just adds to the value of the Living Free Movement. So if you want to check that out, you can also find Adam's work on there as well.
Yeah. Well, I hope you got a lot out of this episode, and it'll spark some interesting conversations around you and your breathwork friends.
I'd love to hear from anyone, especially like maybe breathwork practitioners and facilitators and stuff that maybe disagree with some of this stuff. Yeah, I think there's always lots of different schools of thought around certain things. And I just think it's interesting because, a lot of what Adam practices is rooted in ancient knowledge, as are a lot of these things that have kind of made a resurgence in this modern day. But I'm sure there's people out there that, maybe have different information or things that we're missing. I don't know. I'm open to hearing all of it.
Yeah, I definitely don't agree with everything that Adam said. And it was good to be challenged, though, on some of these, some of the assumptions and some of the stories that he shared, I think were important, like especially about the woman that was having like a nervous breakdown or had you reached your point during some of this faster paced holotropic stuff. But I don't like to be overly cautious either. That's my other thing where I'm just like, I trust myself. You should learn to trust yourself, and you make a decision for yourself. And if you feel called to it, do it. Like there's people that feel called to do stuff that's pretty intense for a time and then later decide that something else is right for them. Sometimes you need that extra energy to move you out of a really, really stuck situation. So it can be a really good catalyst for change.
Yeah. And it's like anything. I mean, when we had Daryl on talking about his experience with ayahuasca, it's a similar thing, right? Like there's a time and a place. I think the way it was used traditionally is very different to the way it's used now. And people definitely abuse it. And it's using your discernment and, like you said, making that decision for yourself. Because for me, I've never really been drawn to plant medicines. I've never really been drawn to that super intense kind of breath work. But I do see that there's a place for it for some people. And what I love about breath work is if you do want to reach altered states of consciousness, like I would much prefer do it without the use of substances. Rather than, going and doing like psychedelics and stuff. Breathwork is a great place to start for that. And so if you're doing like the holotropic stuff or just like the faster paced breathing, every now and then, but, like we discussed, anything can be used to an extreme and used with negative intentions.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely educate yourself more on it. The more you know, the more you'll come at it from a competent standpoint. And, some people are like me where I just jump in and do it without any investigation.
That's Isaac.
Yeah, but it's to each their own.
I think that's a very Cancerian trait because my brother's like that. He's a Cancer too. And you guys just like jump in with both feet. I feel like you do it before you think about it.
Yeah, no fear. Fear is overrated. But I think, I'm definitely grateful for Adam for coming on and sharing some of his stories and insights. And like you said, the information and knowledge he draws on is very ancient. To be certain, holotropic itself started, I don't know, like in the 60s. That version of it. And it came for a reason. It's definitely helping, but it's, it's controversial. And I like it.
So next week's episode, I am super excited for. It's our beautiful friend, Melissa Gray, who is now a German New Medicine practitioner. So Mel is another friend that we met through the Friends of the Truth group, the Here for the Truth podcast, their community group. And when we first met Mel, she was just studying G&M, but still such a wealth of knowledge. We always would go to her with questions and stuff. So now that's what she does, and she's amazing. So she's come on to give us a little education on German New Medicine, which I love.
If you remember back to our episode with Stephen Lair, he mentioned that, and this is a little more of a deep dive into the realms of the emotions in the body and how disease and all that stuff comes from emotional upsets and suppressed emotions and all kinds of stuff. So
it's a different perspective on health, and that's what we're all about here. We're open to, new ways of thinking outside of the old paradigm that clearly doesn't work. And we're here for it.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for that episode next week, and we will see you then.
Yes. See you later.